My husband told me, "You're old, I want a divorce." And my daughter, taking advantage of the situation, threw all my things at the clergy as if it meant nothing. 3 months later, she appeared at my door, totally terrified, and I also revealed a secret. After my wedding with Charles, she was full of hopes and dreams. I moved to my in-laws' house, imagining that this would be a new beginning for me, an opportunity to build a family and create lasting ties. However, the reality I faced was very different from what I had dreamed of. From the first moment I set foot in the house, the reception by my mother-in-law and Aria, Charles's daughter, was cold and distant. My mother-in-law, with a look that almost did not hide her discontent, received me with a simple "hello" without any enthusiasm, while Aria was not even bothered. When they looked at me, there were no hugs or kind words, only an uncomfortable silence that filled every corner of the home. The first few days, I tried to approach them, looking for topics of conversation, offering help in the kitchen, or trying to organize outings together to strengthen our ties. However, each attempt was met with cutting answers or outright ignored. One day, while I was trying to help prepare dinner, my mother-in-law told me with a severe tone, "We don't need your help here, Salma. We know how to run our house." Aria, for her part, did not miss an opportunity to show her rejection. One afternoon, while I was trying to talk to her about her studies, she responded with sarcasm, "I really don't need you to be interested in me. You are just my father's wife." Just these words hit me hard. The atmosphere in the house became more and more tense. The cold looks, the whispers as we passed, and the doors that closed when they saw me approach. They began to be part of my daily life. I felt completely isolated, as if I were a stranger in what was supposed to be my new home. The days turned into weeks, and each attempt to get closer seemed to only deepen the gap between us. I was beginning to doubt myself, wondering if I would ever be part of that family, or if I would always be on the sidelines, looking from the outside at a family life I could never have. Although I fought to stay positive and keep trying to fit in, the hostility only seemed to grow, and I felt increasingly alone and displaced in an environment that should have been welcoming and full of love. The hope of a new beginning was quickly fading, leaving doubts and sadness in its place. One day, after returning from doing some shopping, I came across a scene that I never imagined would happen in my own house. My belongings were scattered around the garbage container, as if everything that represented all my efforts and care had no more value than simple waste. While I collected my things, feeling each piece like a dagger in the heart, Aria suddenly appeared at the back door with an expression of defiance and satisfaction on her face. "You are no longer welcome here, Salma," Aria said with a coldness that cut the air. I tried to process her words as I continued to gather my things, but the pain was overwhelming. I'd put so much effort into taking care of the family and being part of them that the situation seemed surreal to me. "But why are you doing this, Aria? What have I done to you for you to treat me like this?" I asked, hoping for some explanation that would help me understand her rejection. Aria smiled with a kind of malicious pride, as if she had won an award for her attitude towards me. "It's not about what you've done. We just don't want you here. You're a stranger, and you always will be. My father and my grandmother are tired of pretending otherwise." Aria's words were like a bucket of cold water. I couldn't believe that Charles, my husband, shared those feelings. I wanted to believe that there was some mistake, that it was all a misunderstanding that we could resolve by talking. "I'll talk to your father. This can't be happening," I said, trying to stay calm. "Do what you want. It won't change," Aria answered, before turning and entering the house, leaving me alone with my confusion and my tears. I stood there, looking at the things I had rescued from the garbage can, each object a reminder of the days and moments I had shared with them. I felt a deep pain, not only because of the rejection, but because of the indifference with which I was treated, despite all the love and care I had tried to offer since the day I arrived at that house. While I was collecting the last objects, the reality of my situation became evident. No matter how hard I tried, I would never be seen as part of his family. It was time to face that hard truth and consider what would be best for me going forward. The feeling of desolation was overwhelming, but I knew I had to find the strength to make decisions about my future, one where I could be valued and respected as the days went by. My relationship with Charles, who should have been my greatest support, was deteriorating alarmingly. I realized that he was beginning to adopt the same attitudes and behaviors as Arya and his mother, devaluing my efforts and disregarding my emotions. This not only surprised me, but also plunged me into deep loneliness. One day, while cleaning the kitchen after preparing dinner, I tried to start a conversation with Charles about how I was feeling. I hoped that at least he could understand me and offer me some help. Consuelo Fabinot looked up from the newspaper she was reading. Her response was cold and distant. "Salma, don't exaggerate. We are all busy here. You just need to adapt a little more." Her words were a direct blow to my heart. It wasn't the first time I tried to express my feelings, but every time I did, he minimized them and made me feel like my emotions didn't matter. "But, Charles, it's not just about fitting in. Your mother and Arya, they don't really want me here, don't you see?" I insisted desperately, searching for some sign of empathy. Charles sighed with impatience and finally looked at me. "Listen, Salma, enough. This is what it is. I'm not going to constantly argue about this. You need to be stronger and stop complaining all the time." Charles's rejection was a harsh reminder that I was truly alone in this hostile environment. His indifference not only exacerbated my pain, but also reinforced the sense of isolation I felt. The nights became longer and lonelier, and I often found myself crying silently in our bedroom, wondering how I had gotten to that point in my life. Over time, at home, it became even heavier and more tense with each passing day. I felt like I was losing a little more of myself. My self-esteem was fading under the weight of indifference and contempt from my own family. This situation pushed me into a dark corner of my life, doubts and sadness, where the shadows of loneliness were my only constant companions. My heart longed for affection and understanding, but every attempt at rapprochement was rejected, leaving me in a vicious cycle of pain and isolation. It was clear that something needed to change, that I needed to find a way to get my life and my happiness back, even if it meant making difficult decisions. I had reached a critical point in my life where I knew something had to change. The constant devaluation and loneliness had eroded my well-being, and it was clear that my marriage did not offer the happiness I was hoping for. With a heavy but determined heart, I confronted Charles about the only solution I saw as possible: divorce. One afternoon, after a silent, intense dinner, I approached him when he was in the living room, absorbed in television. I felt a lump in my throat, but I knew I had to be firm. "Charles, we need to talk," I said, with a firm but shaky voice. He reluctantly turned off the television and turned to me, a sign that he would at least listen to me this time. "What's happening now, Salma?" he asked with a tone that denoted frustration. I took a deep breath before speaking, gathering up every ounce of courage I had left. "I'm not happy, Charles. I don't think either of us is. This situation isn't healthy for either of us. I think we should get divorced." The words came out of me like a liberating torrent. Although painful, his reaction was surprisingly calm, almost like he had been waiting for this moment. There was no surprise on his face or sadness, just a cold resignation. "It's okay if that's what you want. I'm not going to stop you," he responded with an indifference that cut me deeper than I expected. There was no attempt at argument or question about how I came to that decision. Nothing. "That's it? You have nothing to say?" I asked, a part of me still waiting for some sign that he cared. "Salma, if your mind's made up, what else do you want me to say?" he said with a shrug. His response was so detached that he made it clear that the relationship had ended much earlier in his mind. I felt relieved and devastated at the same time. Relieved that I had finally made a decision to change my situation, but devastated by the complete lack of emotion on the part of the one who had been my partner in life. "Fine then, I will proceed with the legal procedures," I announced, trying to maintain my composure. "Do what you must do," was his only response. I walked back to my room feeling a mixture of freedom and deep sadness. There was no turning back, and although I had expected some kind of reaction, the indifferent acceptance of Charles only reinforced that I had made the right decision. It was the beginning of the end of a stage of my life, and the beginning of a new one, hoping that it would be brighter and full of respect and self-love. It was time to rebuild myself, far from indifference and the lack of love that had marked the last years of my life. After Charles accepted the divorce with a coldness that left me astonished, the situation did not take long to become public within the house. It was not necessary for me to say anything, because the news spread quickly, and Aria's reaction was the most painful of all. It was a sunny day, and I was in the garden trying to find some peace among the plants that I had always liked to take care of when Aria came out to the patio with a triumphant smile on her face. Her attitude was one of joy, completely inappropriate given the circumstances. "So you're finally leaving, aren't you, Salma?" she said, with an almost sarcastic smile, enjoying the moment. "Aria, this is not something that should make you happy. It's a difficult time for everyone," I responded, trying to maintain my composure despite the pain that her words made it difficult for me. "This is a celebration. We never wanted you to be part of our family, and now everything is finally back to normal," she exclaimed, without hiding her joy. I stood looking at her in disbelief. I couldn't understand how someone could be so insensitive. "Do you really think it's fair to be happy for her? Charles is your father, and I was part of his life. You don't care about him?" I asked, although I knew he probably wouldn't change his way of thinking. Aria shrugged nonchalantly. "What matters is that he will be better off without you. We will all be better off. You never fit in here. You were always the strange one, the intruder, and now you have finally realized it and you are leaving." Her words were like daggers, each one cutting deeply. She knew she should be strong, but it was difficult not to feel the impact of her total rejection and the humiliation of being considered an intruder in what I thought was my own family. "Bien, Aria. If that's what you think, I have nothing more to say. I hope one day you can see things from a different perspective," I said, turning around so as not to let her see the tears that threatened to fall. "Don't worry about me. Just worry about where you're going to live now," he replied with a mocking laugh. I walked towards the house, heartbroken, knowing that this was the end of not only my marriage, but any hope of having a relationship with Aria. His celebration of our separation was not only a sign of his rejection, but a confirmation that I was never welcome. At that moment, I knew that the best thing for me was to leave and rebuild my life away from the humiliation and indifference that I had endured after the painful divorce process. I decided that it was time to focus on my personal reconstruction. The following months were a period of deep reflection and renewal. I committed to taking care of my emotional well-being and taking new steps in my professional career, which had been somewhat neglected during my marriage. One of the first things I did was seek professional help to manage the stress and insomnia that had plagued me. Recently, I found a wonderful therapist who helped me work through repressed emotions and find strategies to face everyday life in a healthier way. Each session was a step forward towards my emotional recovery. It is important that you recognize your emotions, but also that you do not let yourself be defined by them, my therapist told me in one of our sessions. I am learning to rediscover who I really am without the shadow of sadness covering itself, I responded, feeling for the first time in a long time a ray of hope and inner strength. At the same time, I returned to my career with more strength. I worked in graphic design and decided to undertake more ambitious projects. With each project that I completed, my confidence grew. Not only was I recovering my financial stability, but I was also rebuilding my self-esteem. My clients began to notice the new shine in my work, and the recommendations didn't take long to arrive. Your work has been exceptional, Salma. You have really captured the essence of what we wanted, commented one of my most important clients after a successful presentation. With the improvement in my career and my emotional state more stable, I decided it was time to change my environment. I moved to a smaller but cozy house in a quiet neighborhood. It was my new beginning, a place where I could be myself without fear or judgment. I decorated each corner according to my liking, putting plants in all the windows and paintings that reflected my passion for art and nature. In this new house, the peace that I had longed for so much finally became present. At night, I no longer tossed and turned in bed fighting insomnia. Instead, I fell asleep, listening to the soft murmur of the breeze. And I woke up every morning feeling that every day was an opportunity to continue growing. This is the beginning of something wonderful for you, Salma, I said to myself one day, looking around my new home with a feeling of fulfillment and gratitude. This period of personal reconstruction was a testament to my resilience and my ability to transform pain into an opportunity to flourish. I now looked towards the future with optimism, ready to face any challenge that came my way. Just when my life was beginning to feel stable and calm in my new home, something unexpected happened one afternoon while I was enjoying a cup of tea in my living room. I heard hurried knocking on the door, and as I opened it, I found Arya standing in front of me, visibly upset, with her eyes full of tears and an expression of despair. "Salma, I need your help, please," said Arya with a broken voice, looking at me as if I were her last hope. Despite the surprise and discomfort of seeing her at my door after everything that had happened, my first reaction was caution. "Arya, what are you doing here? How did you find my address?" I asked, still without opening the door completely. "Please, it's urgent. Things at home are very bad. I need to talk to you alone. Give me a few minutes," she begged with urgency. Although part of me felt compassion for her obviously distressed state, I remembered the harsh words and rejection I had faced from her. I decided I had to stand my ground. "Arya, you were very clear when you said you wanted nothing to do with me. You said they would be better off without me. I can't just forget that because now you're in a difficult situation," I replied, keeping the door only partially open. I know I was horrible to you, but I really have no one else to turn to. Dad." She tried to explain, but words seemed to fail her as tears began to run down her cheeks. "Arya, although I'm sorry you're going through a bad moment, you must face the consequences of your decisions, just as I had to do at the time," I told her firmly, but without cruelty. "But I thought you could..." She tried to interrupt. No, Arya, you decided that day at the door of my old house that you no longer wanted me to be part of your life. You can't just change your mind because the circumstances are now unfavorable to you. You have to learn from this, just as I learned, I said firmly. Arya looked at me. She seemed to understand the purpose of my words. Finally, she nodded sadly and took a step back. I understand. I'm sorry for having... She started, but I interrupted. Goodbye, Arya, I said before closing the door. I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Although part of me wished I could help her, I knew that I had to protect my well-being and maintain the boundaries I had established. It was a difficult but necessary lesson for both her and me. After Arya left, I didn't think I would have to face another uncomfortable situation so soon. However, the next day, Charles showed up at my door. His arrival was as sudden as his daughter's, but with a clearly different and more calculating purpose. Salma, we have to talk, Charles said with a tone that was trying to be conciliatory, but his eyes revealed his true intentions. Despite not wanting to let him in, I knew it was better to handle the situation head-on and end it as soon as possible. It's fine, but be quick, I responded by opening the door for him. Once inside, Charles wasted no time in getting to the point. Look, Salma, things are very bad for us financially. Since you left, we need your help. His voice had a tone of urgency that could not hide his true interest. Charles, we are no longer a family. You and Arya made it very clear that you wanted nothing to do with me. I'm not going to be a part of this, I replied firmly, crossing my arms. Charles frowned, clearly frustrated by my resistance, but Salma, after everything we've been through, you don't think I deserve any support, he insisted, trying to appeal. To some sense of guilt, what we experience does not justify that now you come to ask for money. Each of us must be responsible for our own decisions and their consequences, I reminded him, keeping an emotional distance. Charles changed tactics. His tone hardened. You should think better. Salma could be beneficial for both of us. I could, for example, make things easier for you with the divorce paperwork that is still pending. Don't manipulate me, Charles. I'm not going to give in. I'm fine with my life now and I don't need your help at all, I affirmed, changing my decision with a sigh of resignation. Without any other options, he stood up. Okay, if that's your last word, I'll have to accept it. But don't say I didn't try to reach an agreement, he finally said before leaving my house. Seeing him leave my home, knowing that I had resisted his last attempt at manipulation, strengthened and reaffirmed my independence and my decision not to let myself be used by anyone, least of all by someone who only seeks to benefit himself. This was an affirmation of my new life, one where I was the sole owner of my decisions and my future. Throughout this difficult journey, the lessons I have learned have been invaluable. After facing so many challenges and overcoming adversity, I have come to deeply understand the importance of prioritizing my well-being and setting clear and firm boundaries. This understanding has not only transformed my approach to relationships, but also how I perceive myself and how I decide to interact with others. One day, while sharing a coffee with a friend on the terrace of my new house, the conversation turned to recent experiences and what I had learned from them. If you are still with us, I am sure you will like the story. It really looks like you have changed a lot. I see you stronger and more determined, commented my friend, watching me with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. Yes, I have changed. I learned the hard way that you cannot let your happiness depend on the approval of others. I always tried to please everyone, to sacrifice my own desires and needs for the well-being of others, especially in my marriage. But that only led me to feel belittled and devalued, I explained, reflecting on the past. And how did you manage to change that dynamic? My friend asked, genuinely interested. It was a process that began with realizing that setting limits is not an act of selfishness, but of self-respect. I decided that I would never again allow myself to be treated as if I were less. I began to say no when something did not seem right to me, or when something did not feel good to me. I learned to be alone without feeling lonely because my own company is valuable. I shared with her, hoping that my words could be of some use to her. That sounds really powerful, Salma. It's like you finally found yourself after so long, she said with a smile. Exactly. And a crucial part of this process was learning to forgive not only others, but also myself for allowing situations to go so far. Forgiveness was liberating because it allowed me to move forward without the burden of resentment or regret, I added, feeling a peace that my friend had not experienced for a long time. She nodded, impressed and thoughtful. She knew that what she shared was more than a simple story. It was life lessons that, if understood and applied, could lead someone to a better understanding of themselves and a fuller and more respectful life. This conversation was just an example of how I now use my experiences to help others see the importance of taking care of themselves and establishing healthy boundaries. Every day, I feel stronger and more confident that the path I now follow is the right one for me. Through these learnings, I have not only grown as a person, but I have flourished in ways that I never imagined possible at this stage of my life. I find myself enjoying a full and respectful existence towards myself, a clear reflection of everything I have overcome. The transformation that I experienced, although painful, has taught me to deeply value resilience and self-respect. Every day, I continue to prosper alone, convinced that life truly rewards those who remain faithful and fair, both with themselves and with others. One afternoon, while contemplating the sunset from the balcony of my house, I reflected on the path I had traveled through. The sunlight, the sky in shades of orange and pink, a reminder that even endings can be beautiful. You know, I never thought I would get this far, I told a friend who was accompanying me while we shared a cup of coffee and watched the sky. Seeing the change in you, Salma, it's inspiring. What would you say was the defining moment for you? She asked with a mix of curiosity and admiration in her voice. I took a deep breath, thinking about the question. I think that was when I decided that I should be my own hero, rather than waiting for someone to rescue me or make me happy by giving others too much power over my life. I learned to rescue myself, I responded, feeling a wave of emotions as I remembered those critical moments. That sounds incredibly powerful, she said, visibly moved by my words. It is, and most importantly, I learned not to define my worth by how others treated me. Respect starts with how you treat yourself, and that extends to how you allow others to treat you, I continued. I continue wanting to convey the essence of my journey. Any advice for anyone who may be going through difficult situations? She asked, taking mental notes of the conversation. Never underestimate the power of saying no, set clear limits, and maintain them. Respect yourself enough to walk away from situations and relationships that do not serve you or hurt you, and above all, remember that change is possible no matter how dark everything seems. You can always make the decision to walk towards the light, I said with conviction, feeling each word resonate in the depths of my being. My friend nodded, clearly inspired by the talk. Thank you, Salma. Your words are a true gift, she said with gratitude. In her eyes, I looked back into the sunset, feeling a deep peace and pride. I knew my journey had been challenging, but every challenge had been necessary to get me to where I was now. At this point in my life, I had not only found peace and self-respect, but I had also become a beacon of hope for others. And that, for me, was the greatest triumph of all. If you liked this story, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. The link to another video that appears on the screen will probably move you. We'll see you in the next video.